Hi everyone, my name is Sammy and I talk about human design on my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about the head center. I'll be talking more specifically about what this center is in human design, like a brief overview. Then I'll be talking about what it's like to have an open head center, and then what it is like to have a defined head. So with the head center, which is going to be the triangle on top of the body graph, literally if I was the body graph, it would be like the triangle right here, right? So this head center is a pressure center. That does not mean that it is a motor center. Just to be very clear, it is a pressure center, but it is not a motor. The four motors in human design are the will center, the sacral center, the emotional, I always say emotional authority, the solar plexus, and the root center. So this, when I'm saying pressure center, what I mean is that the root center is a pressure center and the head center is a pressure center. So this pressure center is all about finding the answers, when in reality, this head center is really about asking the right questions. It is a place of inspiration. It is a place that can constantly bring us in a field of doubt, in a field of chaos, in a field of overloading on trying to figure things out, trying to find the answers, trying to figure out how we found the answers, or trying to act on all these inspirations that come into our mind. What is important to keep in mind with this center is that we always look to strategy and authority with all the thoughts of inspiration that come into our head. Whether you have this open or defined, it does not matter. Strategy and authority are there in place specifically for places like the head center. Remember that human design is about not going more in the head. It's actually about getting and being in the body and embodying your human design chart. I know that as someone who has a completely open center, meaning I have no gates to find as well, that it can be very easy to want to just go down that rabbit hole. I have a one line in my profile, investigate everything, find the answers to everything, find the answers to the universe, which are not the questions I ever asked, but questions that the world asked, and get very caught up in things that have nothing to do with me, which can make life seem pretty chaotic. And whether you have this center defined or whether you have it open, we can always lose ourselves trying to find answers that might not be in alignment with ourselves. That being said, the open center, so this would be that if you have this white on your chart, if it is not defined, you could still have gates coming off of this. And if you do, it is important to look at those, because I think you can find more about the shadow aspects of maybe where inspiration could kind of be really taking you down like, a rabbit hole, or like on a positive note, those gates could be a good way to look at like where you feel inspired more from that energy, or from that gate center, or that gate coming off of the center. But that being said, the open center is always amplifying inspiration outside of itself. So a great example, I'm going to use myself since I do have an open center, would be that I love reading, I love audiobooks, I love, I'm really into spirituality, so anything like that is incredibly inspiring for me. It brings me that spark, it brings me that, filling my cup up of inspiration outside of myself. And it is a beautiful way to inspire yourself if you are working on a project or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you don't ever have inspiration outside of you, or that the inspiration only comes from outside of yourself. It doesn't mean that you can't be inspired from within, or that there can't be downloads of inspiration that come specifically and directly to you. And I think that's important to note, because I do feel like when we talk about the open center of the head and we don't acknowledge that, it can make people with an open head feel like none of the inspiration or ideas that they have ever come from themselves. However, I know there's like a quote or whatever that always says everything that's ever been said or thought of has been thought or said before, so everyone just keep that in mind while watching this video. But the thing with the open center, and trust me, I get it as having someone with a completely open head, is that you can feel overloaded by the stimulation outside of yourself. That was one thing with social media. I would get so overstimulated, or I'd have times when I'd be around people with this defined and I would feel like everything that they were doing I had to act upon, or because I would amplify their inspiration, and then I would feel like this is it, this is this big thing, this is fixing all the answers that I've always wanted, and like I've always wanted for myself. This is the answer, this is it. And it would be out of alignment with my strategy and my authority. So for example, I'm a projector and I'm an emotional projector. So instead of waiting the 3 days with my authority, instead of being invited into that inspiration, and even if I was invited into it, still waiting the time to figure out if that was correct for me and allow my head and my thoughts to, go through that cycle of emotions, I would be taken on by this idea without thinking twice about it and regret it later. And there's been many times in my life when I can look back and think about things that I thought were inspiring to me, or they were inspiring, but they weren't my inspiration to act upon. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from what I'm saying is not every inspiration, whether you're defined or open, but really if you're open listening to this, it's like because you're going to feel inspiration from pretty much everything outside of yourself, it's really important that you do stay grounded and that you realize that, our mental thoughts, the waves of thoughts that we have, if we acted upon all of them, we would be so overwhelmed, and we would realize that we're not actually chasing anything that we even want to chase, because we're just doing it out of what our thoughts and minds are telling us to do. We'd be like little, I don't know, just like little gremlins running around like a million different ways. We'd be like ADHD on like crack. I don't know. That's what I think of. And so when we go on that note, when we go to the defined center, what I think of when I think of someone with a defined head, again, they're constantly walking around with that inspiration that's coming from within. And once again, I will say that if someone who had a defined head was around me, it's almost like I'm reading their mind, or like I'm taking in, even if I'm not unaware of it, I'm taking in a lot of what's going on in their mind, which is why it's so important for all of us to be able to have time alone and to really empty out our own chakra systems and our own energy to make sure that we're able to think clearly before making big decisions. So we're able to really be in our own energy and know that that's correct from you and not coming from someone else. People with defined centers are constantly asking questions, and they have a more natural way of getting that inspiration. And again, looking at what channel is making your head defined is really, really valuable for you to kind of see how that inspiration or how those ideas are going to come to you. Because one of the biggest shadow aspects of having this defined is worrying about where the answers are coming from, or worrying about when you're going to get the answers. I know a lot of people I've done reading for that have defined, like their head and ajna are defined. It's constantly this battle of like limitations and this pressure that builds up to try and figure something out that naturally will play out on its own if you're more patient and calm with it. You might feel inspired by something but not have the answers. Again, there is a lot in common with whether it's defined or undefined, but with the definition there, with having that defined on your chart, and again, that means it will be colored in on your chart, It just means that you might not know how you know or even when you'll know, but once you do, it's there. It's like a download. And looking into the channel that you have will be a huge asset to you in kind of relieving you of a lot of the energy you might be spending trying to figure that out. Again, though, if you are defined in this head center, it is important to realize you as well are not here to act on every inspiration that is around you. Again, people who have an open center are going to be inspired by things outside of themselves. And many of those are going to be things that they are supposed to act upon or is part of things that they want to discover or investigate. And it might not be something that someone with that defined inspiration for something wants to investigate. And so that is a way that that inspiration is transferred to another person to be able to cultivate. Whereas the person with the defined center who thought that that was something they had to act upon was miserable or never got anywhere with that because it wasn't theirs to have to begin with. I mean, it was their inspiration, but it wasn't theirs to keep. So a good way of thinking about undefined is that we get inspiration from everything and everywhere, but most of it is not ours to run with. But with the defined head center, you have a more natural source of that inspiration and how it comes to you, but not all of it is meant for you. And so I think that's kind of a beautiful and unique analogy and way of realizing that we do kind of all work together in this oneness to kind of figure things out in our own unique ways and to be inspired for the correct ideas that are correctly aligned with our strategy and authority. Again, regardless of what center it is, but specifically the head center that I'm talking about now, always remember to follow your strategy and authority. All right, I hope this was helpful. I love you guys so much. And again, we've been talking about the head center here in Human Design.